Thank you for attending our mayoral forum. I'm going to just wait another 1 minute or so for everybody to finish logging in. And I'd like to introduce myself. And my name is Melanie Aucello, TA president of 344 East 28th Street. And we also have Louis Flores of Fight for NYCHA. He will be my co-host for the evening. So back in 1 second.
I just want to let everybody know that I'm taking down the names of the mayoral candidates from the participant list. If you're using a name other than your real name and you are a mayoral candidate, please indicate that in the chat so we can identify you for purposes of unmuting you as we create our list.
Hi, I'm Ruth Presley from Hamel Houses, Sergeant at Arms.
Okay, can only the mayoral candidates please keep themselves unmuted? Everybody else, please mute yourself.
Aaron Foldenauer, I'm a candidate for mayor of New York City. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you. Is it Louis?
Louis, yes.
Thank you for hosting tonight.
Thank you for joining us, Aaron. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Joycelyn Taylor here as well, 2021 candidate. Nice to meet all of you. Louis,
thank you for joining us.
Before.
Yes, and I'm glad that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, yes, definitely.
Isaac Wright Jr. Isaac Wright Jr. candidate 2021 New York City Mayor. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Can everybody please mute yourself except the mayoral candidates? Just waiting for 1 more minute and then we can begin.
Okay, we're ready to begin. I would like to just first explain the rules of the forum. So every candidate will be getting a 90-second opening statement period. Then there will be a 90-second period to answer each question. I have 5 questions, and then you'll be given a 90-second period for your closing remarks. We are going to go in alphabetical order. And I would ask the mayoral candidates, if you're not speaking at the time and you see some questions in the chat, if you could please respond to them if you're not speaking. So with that, I'm going to begin, and I'd like to begin with Aaron Foldenauer, if I may.
Thank you, Melanie. Everyone, good evening.
Good evening. So if you would like to begin with your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name's Aaron Foldenauer. I've been a longtime resident of New York City, and I'm an attorney. I've fought for the rights of immigrants. I've fought for the rights of victims of employment discrimination. And I fought for the rights of people who are victims of housing injustice. In fact, I myself am suing my own big name landlord right now because my landlord has engaged in improper conduct. And if only people like you on this forum today had the legal resources like I have, the conditions of our public housing and the way that our other agencies like HPD operate, they would operate entirely differently. The problem we have in the race for mayor is that you have a number of inexperienced candidates, and then you have a number of establishment candidates who have led us to the predicament we are in today. I ran for city council here in District 1 in Lower Manhattan in 2017. I knocked on doors in NYCHA every day. Those who live in the Smith houses, Rutgers houses, LaGuardia, Two Bridges. I was knocking on doors. I was knocking on doors last year in Queens for another campaign in public housing. I've seen the poor conditions of the buildings, and it's time that we hold our workers, our leaders in NYCHA accountable. My name is Aaron Foldenauer. I look forward to hearing your tough questions tonight. My website is aaronfornyc.com. I'll put it in the chat box. I look forward to hearing from you today.
Okay,
Louis
time.
and Melanie, thanks again for hosting.
Thank you, Aaron. So now what I'm going to do is begin with my first question for you, Aaron. I'm going to ask you a sequence of 5 questions, and we're going to do our best to hold strictly to a 90-second answer session, an answer session for each question. If we can adhere to that, then I can get to all 5 questions, if that's all right.
Great.
Question number 1. It's claimed that NYCHA needs $32 billion or more for capital repairs. This figure has never been audited. Can you call for a public audit of NYCHA's capital repair backlog right now? And can you say what items from Fight for NYCHA's people's budget you can support? The people's budget, we have a spreadsheet that's available on our invite.
Website. I'll put that on the chat.
Thank you.
My first day in office as the next mayor of New York City, I will call for a top to bottom audit of NYCHA. The problem is there's a lot of money in the system, but a lot of it goes to waste. One example of that is that if you live in a NYCHA building, you put in a work order, you often need to wait months even for a person to come by on an initial visit. And if you don't happen to be home, they will close the work order and then you have to wait another couple of months. It's totally unacceptable. Number 2, a lot of the contractors that NYCHA uses are actually campaign donors to Bill de Blasio and other members of the political establishment. I'll put a stop to that right away and make sure that NYCHA is getting the best product for the best price, because we don't have time for games. We need to improve housing. We need to do it for everyone, and we need to do it now.
Absolutely. Have you had a chance at all to review our people's budget?
As the first candidate to appear, I'm just seeing the link now, so I'd love to comment on that later. I can tell already from our conversation that you've done a careful job, and I'd be happy to answer more specific questions. But one thing I will say that we need to do is that we need to make sure that we hold people accountable in the agency. So one problem we have with our budget is people are paid, and if they don't do their job, they still get paid. So if we root out people who are getting paid but not working, that'll go a long way to giving more resources to NYCHA.
Absolutely. Thank you. Question number 2. Representative Nydia Velázquez has filed a bill in Congress to fully fund NYCHA. Will you promise to marshal support amongst the New York City congressional delegation so that they vote in favor of that bill in the House of Representatives?
I will marshal support for whatever funding NYCHA needs. I have not reviewed the Congresswoman's bill. I look forward to doing that, but there's no doubt that in addition to mismanagement within NYCHA, we are simply lacking the federal funding that we need. But what we should focus on, because we can't control ultimately the amount of money that the feds give us. I'm glad that Biden's in office. I think that gives us a higher chance of getting the funding that we need, but ultimately we can't control it. But what we can control is how the New York City Housing Authority is operated. And we all know that NYCHA is very inefficient. They're very slow with repairs, and we can do more with the money we already have. Another problem we have, Melanie, and I want to stick to the 90 seconds, is that these buildings were originally built with a useful life of 80 years. For many of these buildings, we're hitting that 80-year threshold. So I think we should also talk about to what extent some of the buildings might be beyond repair and need replacement.
Thank you. Question number 3. NYCHA routinely, as you mentioned earlier, closes out all work orders. The U.S. Attorney's Office has said this amounts to a violation of our civil rights. If elected mayor, will you work with us to fix this so maintenance can actually get the work done?
Yes, and it's a simple matter of accountability. The work orders can be easily tracked. There is a computer system now where work orders are placed, and one can easily audit how long work orders are open. There should be minimal standards for our maintenance staff to ensure that they address a certain number of work orders in a given day. And residents should be offered the ability to provide feedback on the job that is done. I cannot tell you how many stories I have heard from local residents who have mold in their apartments. They wait several months for a maintenance person to come, and the maintenance person comes with a little bit of bleach with a Q-tip, spreads a little bleach over the mold and says, oh, the work order's closed. And of course it's not closed. If anything, you're scratching the surface. So it's totally unacceptable. And that's why we need good management. And it's unfortunate that some of the other candidates like Scott Stringer, Eric Adams, are not here tonight, because I would like to ask them directly why, after years of being in power, they haven't been able to address this problem. And they're the ones who've gotten us in this predicament. Now they want to be mayor, but they're the ones who have allowed this to happen. And all of the identity politics and all of their statements are completely empty because they've completely failed in doing their job in managing NYCHA's finances.
Thank you. And just, I'd like to let everyone know, every mayoral candidate was invited. Question number 4. Many residents that have undergone RAD, as our building is currently undergoing, felt railroaded without legal representation of their own choice, compounded with silence from elected officials. What will you do to claw back corruptly negotiated RAD agreements?
Here's the problem. We have campaign donors who are bidding for these RAD deals. There is a nonprofit industrial complex throughout this city, private real estate developers and supposed nonprofits that are seeking to take these buildings, and all they are simply trying to do is fleece the very people who are in these buildings and pay themselves. If you look at these nonprofits, for example, you can look at their publicly filed IRS 990 forms. And luckily I can do that because I'm a lawyer. And you see the outrageous 6-figure salaries that these administrators and developers are paid. No wonder there is no profit left. So you have these campaign donors who are seeking to pay themselves rich salaries, and they justify that by trying to take over these buildings. And then these contractors, they promise certain renovations are done. They claim they'll fix the windows, they'll fix the floors. Then they do a subpar job and no one's holding them accountable, because most residents are not lawyers like me. I can sue my private landlord, but it's very difficult for most people to have the energy to do that. And that's why we need full accountability, and we need to make sure that we're not allowing our minority communities to be exploited by these developers and nonprofits.
Okay, time.
Thank you. And the last question. Public housing started as a dream come true for people during the Great Depression. It is now a nightmare for most people. What specific ideas do you have to help tenants become upwardly mobile to afford to move out of public housing?
I came to New York City 15 years ago, and I came because I had an opportunity to thrive here. And I want New York City to be a place where people from any economic level have a chance to succeed. The problem, we have a lot of problems in the city. One is with their school system. If you have a child in public housing, you look at the data, they are much less likely to succeed in school because the schools that are serving our communities where NYCHA is located are not as good as the schools as places where others live. So we have to fix our school system, and that'll affect our children. Number two, we have to make sure we reopen our economy. Unfortunately, Cuomo and de Blasio, as many of you heard, have had an ongoing feud for years, and they cannot agree as to how to get this city back on track. You on this call, you don't want an unemployment check. You want to get back to work. You want a job. We need to bring our office workers back and bring our tourists back. But more importantly, we have to do so in a safe way. It's going to be a long time before everyone's able to be vaccinated. So we have to get people to work and make sure they're trained. Do I need to give my website now, or do I have a closing statement, Melanie?
Okay, very quickly, I just have two one answer questions. One, do you support RAD? And two, do you support the blueprint? Yes or no? And then you can make your closing statement.
I'm very concerned about both. So I'd have to look at, there's obviously well-intentioned, reasons behind it, but as implemented, I'm hard pressed to support it right now.
Okay. Now you can, okay. Thank you so much. And we can give you a 90-second closing statement.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining this forum. I hope you stay and listen to other candidates tonight. My name is Aaron Foldenauer. If you go in a Google bar and type in Aaron Mayor NYC, I'm the first hit. I have a passion for getting everyone in this city back to work again. Unfortunately, our city faces a huge budget crisis. And unfortunately, our public housing is in shambles. I see problems with our public housing here in District 1. I saw it in Queens last year, and I've seen it all around the city. So what we need in City Hall is new leadership. We cannot allow the same politicians to simply get promoted and perpetuate the problems that they're trying to solve. So again, my name's Aaron Foldenauer. Thank you very much for your support and for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I will be muting you, Aaron, at this time. You're welcome to stay the entire length. And if you would like to please answer any questions that might be asked of you in the chat. And if we have extra time, definitely open the forum again for everybody.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Lewis. Thanks everyone for attending tonight.
Thank you so much. So I would now like to ask Isaac Wright. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for making time. And I know you're extremely busy scheduled to join us for our mayoral forum. So again, I'll say if you would like to please make your 90-second open statement, that will be followed with me asking questions. You'll have your 90 seconds to answer each question, and then a 90-second closing statement as well. So if you'd like to please begin with your opening statement.
Again, thank you, everyone. My name is Isaac Wright, Jr. Just as a backdrop, I'm a candidate that has a unique background, for lack of a better word. I came from a military background. My father was in the military for 30 years, and I had a pretty good young adult life, very successful. And I found myself in a situation and ultimately, brought me to this point right now. And where I was, as a 20-something-year-old man, I was wrongfully accused, and convicted and sentenced to prison for life, plus 70 years. This happened to me in the late 80s, early 90s. I represented myself in that case. While I was in prison serving a life sentence, I successfully got other inmates free, over 20 of them, who were wrongly convicted. I was doing that while I was fighting for my own life. Ultimately, I was freed by getting a police officer on the stand to confess to the corruption that sent me to prison. Once I got out, I spent the next 7 years pursuing a law degree. I passed the bar the following year after I graduated. And the Committee on Character decided that they were going to investigate me for 9 more years before giving me a license. I did get that license by the Supreme Court and ultimately became one of the most sought after attorneys in the country. There's currently a TV show by ABC called For Life that's inspired by my life. It's on now. It's a hit TV show, and it's, you know, it's the backdrop to all the things that I have accomplished and all the things that I want to accomplish going forward, especially as New York City's next mayor. During that process, I have dedicated.
Go ahead. You can finish. Finish.
Yes, during that process, I have dedicated most of my life to helping others, and so I find myself here as a mayoral candidate with the goal of doing the same thing for New York City.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to begin with question number 1. It's claimed that NYCHA needs $32 billion or more for capital repairs. This figure has never been audited. Can you call for a public audit of NYCHA's capital repair backlog right now? And can you say what items, I'm sorry. And can you say what items from Fight for NYCHA, if you've had a chance to look at the people's budget, you can support? Because we have found alternate ways where we don't need RAD to fix NYCHA.
Well, of course, one of the things that a mayor could do is you know, request an audit. I think there's been audit after audit after audit, and when it comes down to numbers, the history of NYCHA is that there's never been any numbers that really made sense significantly, and that's why there's a federal monitor in place right now to try to deal with those issues of, you know, where's the money. You know, so of course, I would request an audit, but I understand that requesting an audit doesn't necessarily fix the problem. You have a number that's $32 billion. I'm sure that it's in the billions. But if NYCHA would use at least one project, and I think New York's next mayor needs to do that. It needs just one complex as a blueprint in terms of providing a budget on what it's going to cost to bring that particular housing complex up to code, and to use that as a blueprint moving forward for all the other housing complexes. Yes, some are going to be smaller than others, but at least there's going to be a core understanding of what those numbers are. And so there could be a budget that's put together that's based on something tangible, that's based on tests, that's based on inquiry, that's based on contractors and inspectors going out and getting the numbers together, and allowing the mayor to use that as a backdrop or a springboard on which to budget how to bring New York City housing, its maintenance problems and its code problems back up to where it's supposed to be in accordance with regulation, in accordance with law.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. RAD was forced upon us in a process that was never fair, and we were made to sign leases, and currently in our development, we're signing leases that are bad for us. Do you condone the process Mayor de Blasio has used to roll out RAD? And can you right now call for a suspension of RAD and the blueprint by this lame duck mayor and let the next mayor solve NYCHA's financial dilemma?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't like RAD. I don't believe in RAD. I think RAD is a part of the problem. RAD does the same thing, or at least perpetuates the same problems that we've had with NYCHA since the 30s, when NYCHA was created. And that's this: you have NYCHA. When you look at it, you have an organization that houses over 500,000 residences. When you step back and see what that means, what it actually means is that NYCHA is not only bigger than some of the largest cities we know by population, bigger than Atlanta, bigger than Miami, bigger than Oakland, California. It would be a city within a city where no one owns their own home. And so as mayor, the first thing that I would do, I would not only throw out RAD, but I would turn NYCHA not just into a landlord, but into a partnership with its residents. NYCHA would be a conduit for home ownership. And I think after 80 something years, there needs to be some kind of evolution in NYCHA where the residents of NYCHA are not just generational renters, one generation after the other, they're renting, but a conduit to that American dream where the person living in NYCHA can have not only hope, but a future. They can automatically have some kind of worth where they can send their kids to college if they needed money to send their kids to college, where they can leave something for their children, for their future when they're gone. And so, yes, RAD would be thrown out. NYCHA would be converted into this mechanism, not only as a landlord, but a conduit for home ownership.
Thank you. And the next question. Representative Nydia Velázquez has filed a bill in Congress to fully fund NYCHA. Will you promise to marshal support amongst the New York City congressional delegates so that, sorry, my contacts are not helping me, so that they vote in favor of the bill in the House of Representatives?
Absolutely. Housing is a fundamental right. And it's something that as a city, especially one of the biggest cities in the country, housing or having the biggest agency, the biggest housing agency in the country, we need all the money that we can get in terms of being able to not only provide people in New York City Housing Authority complexes with humane living conditions, but also be in a position to expand the way in which we're going to provide housing. And so every single dollar that we can get, whether it comes from the state or the federal government, every single dollar we can get to enhance NYCHA's ability to provide humane housing and to fix the problems that NYCHA has or the housing complexes it has right now, I'm with that. I will champion that every day, day in and day out. That would be a marquee issue for me.
Thank you. The next question. NYCHA routinely closes out all work orders. The U.S. Attorney's Office has said this amounts to a violation of our civil rights. If elected mayor, will you work with us to fix this so maintenance can actually get the work done?
Of course. I think one of the things about issues like this is it goes back to where's the money? Where did it go? And whether or not we got what we paid for. So, I mean, this is a very, very simple answer for me in the sense that, it's not only a yes, but it helps us with accountability. It helps us to understand what needs to be fixed, how much is it going to cost, who's qualified to do the job, and are we getting everything that we're supposed to get for the money that we're spending? And so, the simple answer to that question is yes, I would.
Absolutely. Next question. Many residents that have undergone RAD felt railroaded without legal representation of their choice, compounded with silence from elected officials. What will you do to claw back corruptly negotiated RAD agreements? As specifically, I'd like to ask, like right now, what we're undergoing, right? Like we're going to say, well, Mayor, we had no choice. We were forced to sign a lease. What would you do to negate that?
Well, it goes back to my initial answer about RAD. I don't like RAD. I think it's a perpetuation, of the old way of doing things. And it's only going to get worse when you're dealing with free enterprise and private institutions where the bottom line is making a profit. Ultimately, there's always a scheme to push people out over the long period when it comes to privatization in order to maximize their bottom line. And so the very first thing that I would look to do is to see how I can stop RAD or reverse it in order to move forward with a conduit to home ownership instead of another plan to keep people into that box of generational renters.
Thank you. And the last question. Public housing started as a dream come true for people during the Great Depression. It is now a nightmare for most people. What specific ideas do you have to help tenants become upwardly mobile to afford to move out of public housing?
Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is the opposite of what the mayor is doing today and what past mayors are doing, creating these plans to actually wash their hands of this problem. This is an issue, and especially when you're dealing with RAD, and I hate to go back, but it answers this question. This is really an issue that we're talking about where governments are putting together schemes and plans and mechanisms designed to wash their hands of a problem that should be theirs forever, because they're servants of the people. When you're a mayor, you may be a leader of administration, but you serve the people, and anything that you do should be in the betterment of the people. And so with this situation where we have a housing dilemma in New York City, where people, not only we have an issue with homelessness, but we have an issue where people doesn't even know how long they're going to be in their home, because they don't know when the eviction's coming. They're living from paycheck to paycheck. And so New York City should be a place that's a beacon, a blueprint for every other city to follow when it comes down to the aggression that it needs to take in order to make sure that the people that can afford housing, that needs its help, are not only helped, but are helped in ways where they have hope. You walk into a complex and you see a bunch of hopelessness before you see people, and so New York City needs to turn that around, and they need to create a blueprint for the rest of the country to follow.
Thank you. So now at this point, I would like to ask you if you could please give a 90-second closing.
Thank you. I decided to get into the mayor's race after driving into Times Square maybe a month after the pandemic hit, and seeing that Times Square was empty, and that scared me. Even tracing some of the dilemmas that New York has gone through, if you include even the Spanish flu in 1918, New York continued to bustle. People were dying by the hundreds of thousands, but New York as an economy, as a city, it kept moving forward. If we can go all the way up to, our most recent tragedy, the 9/11 tragedy, thousands of people lost their lives. But if you drove up to Midtown, Manhattan was still bustling. Manhattan was still moving forward. Today, New York is on its knees. And it's a scary, scary, scary thing. Hundreds of thousands of people have lost their jobs. You have high rises where entire floors are empty. You have thousands of small businesses that has lost their jobs or lost their businesses. And you have a situation where the next mayor is going to have to be a mayor that thinks outside the box. New York is a city, unfortunately, that can't borrow money. So it has its budget. It has to beg the federal government, and it has to beg the state government in order to stay afloat. To be the financial capital of the world, that is ridiculous, that is unnecessary, and that should never be happening. And I am that person that's going to turn New York around as its next mayor. I appreciate you all taking the time to listen to me. Thank you for having me.
Okay,
Thank
yes,
you.
I just want to ask two quick questions. One answer questions. You already said you don't like RAD, but can you just go on the record about RAD and the blueprint? Do you support both or either?
I don't like RAD, obviously, and the blueprint. I'm up in the air with the blueprint. It's a flexible concept, and so that I have to say I'm up in the air with it. But I am against anything that's going to ultimately continue perpetual renters.
Okay, and then just really quickly, one follow-up question. What you were talking about, the funding, how the city cannot determine its own finances. Fight for NYCHA has been fighting for more funding, and some of our ideas should go to the city council, but we lack that ability. If you are elected as mayor, what would you do to fight for budget autonomy for New York City?
Well, the first thing that I would do is I would lobby Albany to give us the power to borrow again. Most cities in this country are able to even issue bonds to raise money. And in times like these, where we have these medical emergencies and these pandemics that bring cities to their knees, these are times where we need to issue our bonds, where we need to get in with Wall Street to raise money for ourselves, so that we can account for the issues and the problems, the financial, physical problems that we're having right now. We cannot be in a situation where the hole gets deeper and the only thing we have left to do is to have our hands out. We have to be able to take care of ourselves. And again, as the financial capital of the world, there's no reason why we should not be able to do that.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I would like to say, if you would like to stay on, you're definitely welcome to stay on for the remainder of the Zoom. I'll mute you at this time. If we have time left at the end, I will definitely open the forum again for all mayoral candidates to speak. And if you'd like to answer some questions put to you in the chat, please do so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask Ms. Joycelyn Taylor to join us. Thank you for joining us this evening. Did I say your name correctly? Joycelyn? Jocelyn?
Yes, you did, Joycelyn.
Joycelyn, thank
Yes.
you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So again, I'd like to say, I'm sure you've heard it already, but we're going to have a 90-second opening statement from you, and then followed by my questions, and then a 90-second closing. So if you'd like to please begin with your opening statement.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank Melanie for putting this together for this very important conversation, a very important topic, and Lewis as well. My name is Joycelyn Taylor. I am running for mayor of New York City. I'm running to become the first Black woman mayor of the city of New York. I grew up in New York, and I actually grew up in NYCHA. I knew NYCHA at a different time. When I grew up in NYCHA, we were one of the only Black families in the NYCHA developments at the time. So I know NYCHA very well and intimately, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart. I still have family and friends that live in NYCHA. So what happens to NYCHA residents impacts me personally still to this day. I decided to run for mayor pretty much because much like many of you on this call, I'm tired. I'm tired of us talking about the same things over and over again and not seeing any results and solutions. I'm tired of us talking about things as though they're happening by osmosis. We have literally created every law, policy, and procedure in the city. Those laws, policies, and procedures have taken us to a place where we've seen an increase in homelessness, a education system, a climate crisis, and a police department that is not functioning well. We have the ability to change that. And that comes not just through me becoming mayor, but through the movement and the support of the people of this city. It's time for the people of the city to allow their voices to be heard. It's very disappointing to me that the city has become so comfortable with ignoring 600,000 residents in the city of New York. That is not acceptable. So I'm running for mayor to change that dynamic. Every day, all of us, each and every one of you on this call, every day we're investing in this city. It's time for us to see a return on that investment. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you. And so now I'll begin with our first question. It's claimed that NYCHA needs $32 billion or more for capital repairs. This figure has never been audited. Can you call for a public audit of NYCHA's capital repair backlog right now? And we're saying right now to the mayoral candidates because you do have the power to ask for that at this time. And can you say what items from Fight for NYCHA's people's budget you can support? Because like I said earlier, our people's budget, which is it's on our link, we found ways where NYCHA can be fully funded without RAD and private developers.
Yeah, so let me just say that I've been out supporting NYCHA residents with, many of their endeavors, and I definitely would call for an audit. I've had those conversations. I work with Sondrea Coleman and Holmes Isaacs, Stan Morris and Sugar Ray out in Queensbridge, as well as Pink Houses and other developments. We need to be audit, but on a parallel track, we have to make these residents whole. And I do support some of the items that you have on your people's budget, defunding the police. Yes, we should defund the police. At this moment, when everyone sits back and talks about, the increase in crime, all that says to me is that that's a $6 billion failure to perform, right? We're not getting our money's worth. So yes, I haven't had a chance to look at all of the items in totality, but there are many items that you list here that I would definitely support.
Thank you. Question number 2. RAD was forced on us in a process that was never fair, and we were made to sign leases that are bad for us. basically we were told sign the lease or you're put on a month-to-month. There's no choice. So do you condone the process Mayor de Blasio has used to roll out RAD? And can you right now call for a suspension of RAD and the blueprint by this lame duck mayor and let the next mayor solve NYCHA's financial dilemma?
Yes, let me be clear. I've said over and over again that we need to put this whole thing with RAD on pause. It's just amazing to me that we ignore 600,000 people and then we're going to just arbitrarily tell them what we're going to do with their lives after we've ignored them for years. I'm not a proponent for RAD. You know, we talk about equity and equality all the time in this city. Equity is not making NYCHA residents Section 8 certificate holders. That's not equity. That's putting money in someone else's pocket. If you want to give equity, then create ownership opportunities for the NYCHA residents. Many have lived there generation after generation. They have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent in NYCHA. It's time for them to see a return on that investment. 10 years from now, they'll be talking about how these city employees, and my dad was a bus driver, so the idea that NYCHA residents are not working people is a myth. You have city employees that are serving the city every day living in NYCHA. And the idea that we want to take these city employees for generations who have put up with all of these things that the city hasn't done and now turn them into Section 8 certificate holders is unacceptable. Because 10 years from now, you'll be talking about how they're reliant on the government, when the government did not do their job, and this was the only solution they could come up with. We have to be better problem solvers than that. We need better solutions. My vision is to create ownership opportunities. My vision is to invest in NYCHA because everybody deserves to have basic housing. Housing is a basic right. So we have to invest in that.
Thank you. The next question. Representative Nydia Velasquez has filed a bill in Congress to fully fund NYCHA. Will you promise to marshal support amongst the New York City congressional delegation so that they vote in favor of that bill in the House of Representatives?
Yes, and I would also ask that we look at, you know, what it is exactly that we're asking for and create acts where we can get wins. The reality of the situation is that the federal government came tomorrow and said, here's $32 billion. We don't have the workforce to do all the work at once. We just don't have that type of manpower. It would certainly help, especially in this crisis, to jobs and opportunities, and we would certainly take as much of that money as we possibly can. But we have to come up with a plan as to what exactly needs to be done based upon risk. When I look at NYCHA development right now, we're pointing on outsides of the building when the boilers aren't working. We're not operating in an efficient manner. Why are we working outside in? Even in construction, I own a construction firm. You work from the top to the bottom and inside out. We shouldn't be fixing the outside of NYCHA developments when the inside is falling apart. So it's about you have, but how you use the funds that you have effectively and determining what poses the biggest risk. Cannot go year after year with NYCHA residents not having basic heat and hot water. Those are the things that need to be addressed. And then we also have to take care of the other repairs, and we have to actually not just repair, but we're at a point where we need to replace. We need to replace kitchens. I've gone into some NYCHA developments and I've seen the work they're doing. We're not getting a bang for our buck. We're paying these carpenters $98 an hour. That work is not acceptable.
Absolutely. You definitely know NYCHA.
Yes.
The next question. NYCHA routinely closes out all work orders. The U.S. Attorney's Office has said this amounts to a violation of our civil rights. If elected mayor, will you work with us, which you did basically already say, but I just do want to finish asking the question. Will you work with us, residents as well, tenant leaders, presidents, because we're asked for our voices, but we're ignored, to work together with maintenance so we can actually get the work done?
Yes, I would. And I actually work with the residents at pink houses where I used to live. And we wrote a letter to the mayor and all of our elected officials, because when I lived in NYCHA, NYCHA was proactive. It was not reactive. The responsibility was not on the tenants to let NYCHA know what's going on. There's a light out in the hallway. No, buildings operate every day in an efficient manner in this city. You know, I was at a press conference, and one of the things that I said is that I've never had to come to press conferences in other neighborhoods, because when we want to get things done in the right way, we know how to do it. So yes, I would definitely be a proponent of that. I would want to go back to us being proactive. I don't know how many of you have lived in NYCHA for a long period of time. I remember our apartment being inspected every year. I remember there being a schedule where everyone got new kitchens. Everyone received new bathrooms. Everyone got new appliances. We have to go back to that proactive model and stop pretending as though the dollars that these NYCHA residents are investing in the city, they don't deserve to see a return on that investment on them.
Thank you. The next question is, many residents that have undergone RAD felt railroaded without legal representation of their choice, compounded with silence from elected officials. What will you do to claw back the corruptly negotiated RAD agreements?
Yeah, well, I've already been writing letters to elected officials to, you know, indicate my, to indicate the fact that I'm just not a proponent of RAD. I'm not. You know, if we want to build equity, we have to have ownership opportunities. We have models that we could look at in the Bronx. We have Rochdale and Queens. We have models for that. I don't believe that we should put residents on Section 8 certificates. So I would definitely be a proponent. I don't think we have until the next mayor is elected to start having those conversations. I think we have to continue to have those conversations now and see where we can put a pause on this so that residents aren't in a situation where they have no recourses. Residents of NYCHA should not have to fight for the basic right to stay in their apartment. And no one talks about what happens when, you know, your Section 8 certificate. Do you have to renew that every year? What happens if you start making more money? Do they reduce the amount of Section 8 that you receive? You know, there are so many questions that need to be asked, and residents are being given the impression that, oh, we're doing you this huge favor. But as I look at it, it doesn't make sense to me. And all of that money that you're going to give to developers in Section 8, quick way to remedy it, take that same money and invest it in NYCHA. You don't have to use the developers as a pass-through. You don't have to give them ownership for them to do their jobs. So unless the city isn't telling us something and being honest with us about something as it relates to the budget, we need to create some changes as it relates to what's going to go on with NYCHA. RAD is not the path.
Thank you. Just to add to what you're saying, I have a question about, have you heard anything about what they're going to do to us residents during the RAD renovations? They want to do the in-house rehabilitation, which is posing quite a threat to residents because our apartments are contaminated with mold, lead, and asbestos. So I'm just curious to know what you think about the fact that they want to do this in-house rehabilitation with us living in the apartment as they rehab.
Yeah, in some instances, like in the developments in Boulevard in Brooklyn, they mentioned that they would have some vacant apartments that they would, you know, have available if they need to move tenants out. I think when we go, part of the inefficiency of the city is that when we think about doing something, we don't think about all of the steps. We don't think about everything that's going to take place and transpire. Like, you want to do this, how do you do this? What's the most efficient way to be able to do this? And you're right, it does, especially if you have young kids in the apartment, you have to, you know, identify and deal with the health risks that are associated. So they have to come up with a plan. I would want us to have a plan as to how we're going to manage to possibly move the tenants in the interim, or come up with a plan B if that tenant staying in the apartment is not safe.
Thank you. And the last question, public housing started as a dream come true for people during the Great Depression. It is now a nightmare for most people. What specific ideas do you have to help tenants become upwardly mobile to afford to move out of public housing?
Well, one of the things have to do, you know, it's interesting because there's a lot, I've been having a lot of conversations with people about universal basic income. You know, and one of the things that we have to do is I've said to people that instead of giving people $2,000, why don't we find a way to create jobs that people can have for $50,000? Because $2,000 gets you through this moment. A $50,000 job, a year job, can actually create change and impact your life going forward. So we have to create job opportunities in this city of New York. We talk about $15 an hour all of the time, but the reality of the situation is $15 an hour is not sufficient, especially when we live in a city where we have studio apartments now that are $2,000 a month. So we want people to be, you know, mobile. If we want to create equity, you don't give them Section 8 certificates, you give them ownership. You don't give them, you know, $2,000 checks, you give them a job that's going to, you know, really impact their future. You don't give them, you know, EBT cards, you give them a job. And those are the things that are going to really impact people's lives and have change that relates to their lives. Those are the things that we have to start looking at. And especially for Black and brown communities, where we talk about how they're disproportionately affected all the time, but none of our solutions have long-term impact and effects. We have to start looking at long-term impacts and effects if we really want to create change in those communities.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'd like to ask if you could at this time give your closing statement.
Well, thank you so much. Well, listen, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to, you know, hear my plan and my position, my vision for NYCHA residents. As I mentioned, you know, NYCHA is something that is really near and dear to me as a resident who grew up in this city. You know, we look at the leadership in the city and we look at celebrity and we put that on a pedestal. But what I want to say to you in this moment, 2021 is a very critical time. It's not just a critical time for the city, but it's a critical time for us. And, you know, through this pandemic, we've all been through a lot. But one of the things that we have is the ability to create the change that we want to see. In 2021, we'll be electing about 35 new city council members, as well as, you know, determining whether or not we're going to elect the old ones. We'll have a new controller. We'll have a new public advocate, possibly. This is an opportunity for us to ensure that we elect a contingency of all of the right people so this continual fighting can stop. Because we're continuing to fight and no one is winning. It's time for us to come together to create a movement and work together to create the change that we want to see. I look forward to working with each and every one of you because it's not about me. No decision I make can be about me because every decision I make will impact each and every one of you. If you want to, and I just want to say, if you want to find out more information about my campaign, please make sure you go to my website at taylor42021.com. And you also follow all of my social media at taylor42021. It's going to take us working together to create this change. Absolutely.
Louis, do you have any questions?
Yes, I just want for, I'm asking everybody to go on the record, yes or no, do you support RAD and the blueprint? Because this information is going in our spreadsheet that we're creating.
No, I do not support either. I believe that we are able to come up with better solutions. We need a solution that includes input from the people who are going to be impacted by it. We cannot treat the people of NYCHA as though they have no say, as though they have no value, as though they don't matter. They are going to be living there. We should develop something that they will be happy with when it's done.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time for us tonight. We appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and I just want to say, you know, for everyone on this call, you know, I know I'm supposed to be done talking, but for everyone in this call, I want you to know if all of the candidates were invited to this call, who's here is very telling for you. Who was here? Because for years, NYCHA residents have been ignored. And I don't care how big the platform is or how small the platform is. If you care about something, you show up.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Every candidate was invited. They were given plenty of notice. And I will definitely leave it at that. Definitely. So that's why I do definitely appreciate Aaron, Isaac, and Joycelyn for taking the time out of their, I know, extremely busy schedules for us, because you know, that's validating for us as human beings. And as a NYCHA community, one of the most underrepresented communities in all of New York City. So we really do appreciate your coming, all of you. Thank you.
Thank
As
you so
well.
much.
Louis?
Yes, I just want to say a few words, and then if Diane is still here, I'd like for her to speak as well. Fight for NYCHA continues to oppose RAD, and we will be, we are now working with other groups, and we will be announcing a protest soon so that we can keep this issue alive for the mayor's race. We do want to congratulate all the mayoral candidates who showed up tonight. That shows a lot of leadership, and it shows commitment. Like everyone has said tonight, or as others have said tonight, NYCHA residents keep getting ignored. And by you showing up here this evening, you show that you care about the people who live in public housing. So thank you. And if Diane would like to say anything, I'd like to invite her to say something.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Diane Dejesus. She's our 344 board treasurer.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for all coming and showing your interest and support on our forum. Yes, NYCHA needs a whole do-over, audit it, and RAD is just gonna make poverty worse. It's just making our more rules to the effect of living as a human being in housing. And I hope that the future is a better one to come for all of us.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, and so we'll be announcing our next steps and soon. So check your email and make sure you follow Fight for NYCHA on Twitter and Facebook.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. And all the residents of 344 will be having our resident meeting very soon. So look for that flyer. Thank you, everyone, especially to the candidates. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the residents and everyone who joined our call tonight. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good night.
Good night.
And thank you too. Thank everybody.
Thank you.
Grateful for you all. Good night, everybody.
Good night. We still need to ask about infrastructure.
We have to ask about a lot of things. We'll get
I
there.
agree.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.